Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session with your host,
Michael Rearden.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Hey, how are we doing, Dagna?
I'm good. How are you, Michael?
Good. Did I get your name right?
Yes.
Ooh, good. So today we're going to be just talking about your work as a career coach. I know you have a good backstory, so if we can, begin with that and then go
Sure.
into your work.
I do want to share the book that just came out. Literally, it's in the launching stages.
Mhm.
So I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Awesome.
Yeah, so just get into your work and then we'll bring up the book later.
Awesome. So essentially, as a career coach, I'm an engineer turned coach for engineers right now and professional and ambitious professionals in tech. I've been an engineer myself, so I very well understand what it means to, work in tech on a daily basis. And I help my clients overcome very common obstacles like imposter syndrome, burnout, having trouble dealing with other people, as well as some self-marketing struggles. So that's what I do as a coach right now.
What would you say the personality of engineers?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, stereotypically, we would think about someone stuck behind their screen, being somewhat introverted, um, focusing on solving difficult technical problems, maybe a little bit nerdy or geeky, right? But the reality is there's so much variety in different shapes and forms that engineers come in nowadays that it's really, there's many different kinds of people in the tech field and the tech industry at this point in time.
How do you handle the different types of variety of people that you work with? Because as you said, people are introverted sometimes when they're behind the computer all day. I know many people who just kind of, do their IT stuff and then it's kind of like they just do that, they go home and they just live that I don't want to say lonely life, but they are very comfortable in their own shoes. So like how are you able to reach them?
Easily. Usually they come to me because they have reached the glass ceiling or they're getting passed over for promotions, feeling frustrated that nobody sees their brilliance and hard work. And we often do an assessment of like what are the gaps in their mindset and their skill set that needs to be filled in for them to get what it is that they're looking for. And if you think about how engineers are being educated and trained, a lot of the time it's the technical skill that are being put on such a high pedestal, and the soft skill related to dealing with other people are kind of sometimes even just ignored. So many engineers do not have those skills, but it's not fault of their own. They are being just essentially trained to believe that tech skills, it's all that it's important. It's the only thing that's important. Where in reality, it's not, because as engineers, what do? We create products for other people or products with other people. So the people aspect is inescapable. It's just that many of us have not had that kind of opportunity to learn those soft skills on our own.
I know you were in the engineering world and then you got out and then you became a career coach for engineers, and not just for engineers, I'm sure for anyone. But there is a type of mindset that you need to have, I believe, when you want to go into a profession. So, for example, like when I was in sixth grade, I had that inkling of me wanting to be a teacher. And it
Okay.
was, just like a feeling like, I think I want to be a teacher, but then I'm like, teachers don't make any money. So there was a lot of back and forth in my mind, and there's some confusion of what I wanted to do in my life and, for my long term career. And I know many people, they struggle with this because they don't want to necessarily make the wrong choice because they have to go to college or they have to go for some type of certification. There could be some type of financial commitment there. And many people are afraid to, take that step into the wrong direction. What would you say for anyone maybe wanting to be an engineer, like, because you have already walked this path and you have worked with many engineers before, is a good tell sign that you're in the right profession or that you're going into the good or the right profession?
So first of all, what I'm going to say is that profession is not a marriage. You don't try to pick one and stick it till the rest of your life for the good and the bad. No, you can change professions at any point in time. I started off as a robotics engineer. Then I moved into software engineering, which is not really the same. And then from being a software engineer, I ended up becoming a coach. And the reality is that as I was progressing in my path, what I was really chasing was impact. When I was 15 years old, I wanted to build the future. And it just felt like such an important thing to me, but I couldn't really tell what it actually meant. So building robots felt like something that's very futuristic and cool. And if I build a robot that lands in space, I mean, how cool would that be, right? Where in reality, whenever you're building a robot, it takes a long time to build it, to test it, to make sure everything is appropriate, to then send it to the space, for example. And the robots that I had a chance to work with in my professional career ended up being kind of like a collaboration project from different universities in European Union, because that's where I'm originally from, Poland. And we had the funding. It's kind of like a DARPA equivalent here in the United States. And we would work with different colleges creating those robots. And the reality is that just a few PhD students would ever work with the robots that I was helping create, right? That wasn't an impact. This is not what I was looking for, right? So then when I moved into programming, I realized whenever you hit that deployment button and your app is on an app store or gets propagated across all the clients that the company has, now you're touching millions of people and you're affecting millions of lives. And it felt really cool having that kind of impact, right? But as I progressed in my engineering career, what happened was I burned myself out. And at a certain point, doing the fun and intellectually stimulating, creating new features, deploying apps on a massive scale, and fixing any bugs that might be happening, like that was fun. It used to be fun, and then became just meh. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to wake up and go to work anymore. It was all kind of coupled with me entering new stages in my life too. So I immigrated from Poland to United States, and I never really stopped to think about what that transition meant for me and how I was like closing a chapter of my life. And even though nobody died, it felt like I had a hard time of letting it go and moving on. And at the same time, I became a parent. So postpartum depression hit me, and it wasn't fun. And it all kind of like amassed together. And I ended having to reach out for help. I ended up enrolling myself in therapy and have had phenomenal experience using just talk therapy to analyze what was going on, to essentially discover the bugs that were sitting in my mental code here in my own mind. And whenever I was able to get past a lot of the things that were holding me back, to reprogram my own thinking, it was such a relief. It changed my life in a very positive way. And I realized, wow, this is an incredible impact that someone might have on another person simply by talking to them. This is what I want to do next. I mean, how cool is that? Right? And so, for example, today, as I work with my coaching clients, I've helped many transition in a very short time span, because my coaching package is typically 4 months long. And I've seen people achieve incredible transformations in that time, like getting skip level promotions, doubling their salaries, leaving imposter syndrome behind, feeling 80% less of anxiety in social situations, being finally able to make friends or speak up in a public setting. And that is just making me so excited about being a coach and who I am. So going back to your question, what advice would I give people who are trying to figure it out? First of all, it's not a marriage. You can always change your mind and jump to a different profession. And there's a phenomenal book called Range, How Generalists Thrive in a Specialized World. And I highly recommend reading the book. I can't remember the author, sadly. And the second advice I would give is follow your spark, follow your curiosity. Do what's really interesting so you don't have to feel like you're working, so you don't have to feel like you're forcing yourself to get things done, right? That'd be my advice.
Excellent advice. I think this is going to be a good segue because my next question, I'm sure, is going to be almost in line with your book. And it's going to be talking about burnout, where there's two prongs: how to prevent burnout and then how to recover from burnout. And it could be, maybe with the brain refactor, but it could be just something different that you have been able to, learn to do through. I know you said you did some therapy and the talking therapy, and it helped you. That could be a great tool for individuals to get out of that burnout, to recover from it. But then some people, they need to go on vacation or something. I mean, vacations where, me don't work. Like, I'm just like a workaholic, but then I know when to take a step back. If I feel burnout's coming, I go, whoa, 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 let me let off the brake or let off the gas. And I don't typically press the brake. I just kind of say, let me cruise for a bit,
Oh, there you
because I
go.
have found that medium for me. Like, this is where I'm good, regardless of how I feel. If I'm tired, doesn't matter. If I'm hungry, it doesn't matter. I'm typically good in this lane. Now, if I overextend myself and I get burned out, it could take three months sometimes for me to get back to where I should be. So I always say the best thing to do with burnout is to not let it happen. But I want to hear your take, and then especially if it's in line with your book.
Absolutely. I'd love to dive deeper into that, but Michael, I think that you really hit the nail on the head. Like, the best thing about burnout is to just prevent it from happening altogether. That's so very true. But let's think about it for a second. Why does it happen? Why certain people tend to burn themselves out? Why do they have that tendency? So my theory is that it's a bug in your mental programming. And I compare in my book that you just mentioned a moment ago how human brain is very similar to computer software, to an app. So if you have things that you're seeing that are not working out for you, these are basically bugs. And you have to jump into that code that's sitting in behind your ears in your brain, that's been created throughout your entire lifetime, and refactor it. You have to reprogram it. You have to put in new code that will serve you better. So burnout happens because we believe we need to work hard, and we don't believe that resting is actually a great investment strategy, right? So when I work with my clients who are either on the verge of burnout or have burned themselves out, we have to rebalance and have a different, change their perspective about how to value well-being and how to see it as a strategic investment in their career. Because whenever you're burned out, you're not capable of producing anymore, right? And if you think about your brain as a tool that you're using to execute whatever it is that you're trying to do, whatever it is that you need to do in order to get things done, then would you tell your tool to, get out of shape or not be sharp anymore or just not do any maintenance, right? You need that maintenance in order to continuously work on a high level in performance. So one of the things that I highlight in the book that's really helpful for burnout is software updates, which is working with a coach or a therapist, someone who can help you spot that programming that is in your brain that is currently leading you towards burnout, as well as I talk about hardware updates. What is it that you can do to your brain to make its hardware work better, to be more efficient, to be more optimized? And some of the things that I talk about in the book is doing a neurofeedback training. It's essentially a type of training that's cutting edge in medical field right now. In fact, many doctors don't even know about it. All the doctors that I know, I told them about the neurofeedback training that I did, and they were like, "Oh wow, this is so cool. How did they not talk about it in medical school?" Well, because it's not that old to be in the curriculum for medical professionals. So many people don't even know that it exists. But what neurofeedback training does is essentially optimizes your brain hardware. It rewires its brain. It helps it function on a much better level. in a much better way, be more efficient, right? So you could think about it as taking your car and doing a tune-up to your car at a mechanic shop, basically, right? You show up, you turn your car in, you get it out, and everything's aligned. Everything works silky smooth like a well-oiled machine. Same thing happens with the brain. We don't really think about it that way, but a lot of our brains are, especially if we are experiencing anxiety, depression, problems sleeping, rumination, excessive worry, all this happens because our brains are not running like a well-oiled machine. There is something on the hardware level that isn't fully integrated and working well together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I have a lot of questions because, hardware and software, and we look at the brain because there's so much that influences the mind. It could be the foods that we eat, the things we consume, and it doesn't even just have to be the foods that we consume. It could be the things that we indulge in. Think of our phones or, our cell phones and stuff like that. Maybe movies, negative behaviors, vices, smoking, drinking. I'm not saying that you can't do these things, but does it affect the hardware and the software of the mind?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's the short answer.
hmm And if we understand that, then what is the remedy for people to maybe enjoy some of these things or maybe get rid of them altogether?
So I would say that it's kind of like with that software update that I mentioned, right? You want to change your actions, is what you're saying, Michael. I want to stop binging Netflix movies because I know it's bad for me, right? Let's take that as an example on the books. Basically, it's easy to say that you want to stop doing it and then not really follow through, right? Because the way the mind operates, like a computer, there's a lot of things that are happening on the user interface level, the things that you can see. In the case of mind, it's the thoughts that you can hear in your own head that you like whenever you're thinking rationally. But most of the work, it's being done on the subconscious level, right? Or in terms of computer software, they're running as a background process. And these background processes are put there, again, trained like AI on a lifetime of experiences. That's your data set, your life. And your lived experience programmed you to be who you are. So if you feel that binging a show is actually a great reward for working hard the entire day, it's very unlikely you're going to change that behavior. You need to go into the background processes that are hidden from the users, from the user interface. You have to dig deeper in order to get to them and reprogram those and see a reward in something else, right? Or change your definition of hard work so you don't work yourself to the point that your brain is just not capable of doing anything else other than binging a Netflix show. So what I'm saying here, in other words, is if you want to change your actions that you think are not serving you anymore, you have to reprogram what it is that you believe to be true about yourself, about your operating system. What is it that you value? What is it that you don't value? A great example from this morning, my 5-year-old did not want to eat the breakfast that I prepared for him because it had veggies. But I tell him, son, do you want to grow and be strong and be intelligent and be healthy or not? And he's like, yes, of course, I want that. I'm like, okay, then eat your veggies. So in his mind, I am literally programming eating veggies equals what I want, even though I don't like eating veggies. I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. I want to be intelligent. Okay, I'm going to eat my veggies. And he did eat them, right? So it's really about how your operating system is written, about what it is that you believe about yourself to be true, what it is that you value, what it is that you want out of life, and then figuring out how current actions are either supporting what you want or don't support what you want, but maybe you're not seeing it seeing it at this point in time. Because everything you do has perfect sense. Everything your mind makes you do or think has been created as a function of your life, again, right? And whenever it was put in there, that line of code into your mind, it was to serve and protect you. It might no longer serve and protect you 20, 30, 40 years later, but at the time that this mechanism, this background process was put into place, it made perfect sense. So that's why you do what you do, right?
One of the things I like to do when it comes to, the podcast, and I ask questions and stuff because that's what we do, is I ask different iterations of a question. So do it because not everyone is going to resonate sometimes with how we say it the first time. And they say you don't really get a deep, meaningful question until it's like the third time. I'm not going to do it 3 times with you today, but I'm going to ask it a different way. This is going to be definitely into the engineering type of mindset because there's so many people that listen from all walks of life, here for personal development, self-help. And the question is, how do we get rid of the virus in our brain if we have one? How are we able to purge a thing that we consider a virus? And I use the word virus loosely because it can be anything you think. A virus could be like, I'm in a toxic relationship, or I'm in a toxic profession, or I'm not eating good. So we have this virus, and it could be universal, right? So how would someone purge that from their brain?
So awareness is the very first step, right? Just saying, oh, this isn't working isn't going to serve you well, right? But understanding why it's not working, what are the root causes of this virus being there? When you understand the root causes, you can dig deeper, right? So, for example, you're in a toxic relationship. Why are you in a toxic relationship? Is toxic relationships all you've ever seen in your life and you just don't know how a healthy relationship looks like? So you're gravitating towards what's familiar, right? Or is it something else, right? So understanding why that virus is there is the very first step. The second is examining what kind of programming comes to mind. So in terms of code, we would jump into the code base and analyze file after file, line after line, to understand why an app acts the way it acts and produces the outcomes that it does. In terms of a mind, that's an equivalent of jumping in and analyzing whatever memory comes that is related to that event, to that situation, to those triggers. Or what kind of beliefs do I have about that event or that situation? In a toxic relationship example that you mentioned, Michael, what we could think of, what are the beliefs that you have about yourself or the world or the other people, and start writing them down. It's very important to write things down because that process of putting things on paper, called externalization, helps us get a little bit of distance. If we're trying to process it all just in our head, that's not going to be helpful at all. We're just going to get lost in our own thoughts and probably get sidetracked and distracted as we're analyzing the code. So what we need to do is we need to write it down. The moment you write down your beliefs, your thoughts, what's coming up. So for example, let's say one thing that could come up is a deep-seated belief that you're not worthy of a better relationship, right? And whenever you realize that this is something that you believe to be true, and then realize that it's just a line of code that someone or something has put in your head a long time ago, and maybe it served you back then, it helped you survive, it helped you get to where you are in life, it's no longer serving you. So you have to get that line and get rid of it. You have to reprogram it. In terms of human mind, what works is repetition. So one of the things that I highly recommend my clients do whenever we're working on reprogramming their minds is this super simple exercise. It's every night, whenever you brush your teeth, stand in the mirror and find good things about what you've done that particular day. And say that appreciation to yourself out loud. Best if you can tell yourself, hey, I love you. And then deeply look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror. Why? Because most of us never grew up with that kind of experience. And it's really important for your self-worth, for having healthy relationships, for having confidence, to have that self-love in place, being programmed in your mind. And if you repeat that behavior for a number of days in a row, what's going to happen? You'll start noticing that you start thinking differently because you have reprogrammed parts of those beliefs. But the very first step, awareness and analysis, where's it coming from? And then doing something to replace what's not working with what is, in order to reprogram that mind of yours, leading you to do exactly what it is that you're currently doing, right?
I'm going to definitely keep on with the terminology of programming, but there's so many different other words you can use. It could be indoctrination, blank canvas, whatever it be, of how a mind develops. Think of a child, right? Your son, for example, 5 years old, he doesn't want to eat vegetables, but you say, hey, if you want to be big and strong, you have to eat your vegetables. So, in a sense, we're programming, we're going to program him to eat vegetables because they're healthy for us. And sometimes the programming that we can give a young mind or a teen or a young adult or even a full-fledged adult, the programming can be skewed and it could be not appropriate for what they would like to attain in their life. So for example, if I don't program I'm using the word engineering terms today because I know people are going to lose it. You're a programmer. You're a programmer, Michael. No, I'm not a programmer. It's just a vernacular that we're going to use today. It's it's so like I can program someone to eat candy all their life, saying candy is good, like love candy. Then you got all these cavities, and then you got some big problems. I can also program someone to brush their teeth every night, after every meal, not to eat too much candy. It's not good for you. Program you to eat vegetables. I can program you to do many different things. But I do want to talk about just the aspect of how a person grows up and their brain develops, because it is going to be unique to the person depending on their parents, what type of school, friends that they have around them. But do you think, especially, coming from where you were in Poland, right? And
Yep.
then now in America, America has a very different way of upbringing children. And I'm sure that's one of the first things you notice. Do you think that our programming is going in the right direction, or there needs to be some change in the code?
I love some of the initiatives that I'm seeing of bringing more mindfulness into schools, because that can solve a lot of problems, really helping kids to think for themselves and making good decisions, because they're capable of that. Their brains are wired to make good decisions. And in terms of brain development, my son is at the age of 5, like we talked about it. His brain is like 80% developed, right? The next 20% will mature over the next 22 to 25 years of his life, right? And even after that, the brain, as we know now, has a lot of neuroplasticity. So it can change and reprogram at, whatever age. You could be 95 working on some improvements if you wanted to. You absolutely can. And one thing that I did with my son is that I also took him for the neurofeedback training. I did it for myself and it worked wonders, optimizing my hardware to avoid postpartum depression when I was pregnant again. And for my son, we thought that he might have ADHD. And neurofeedback training is recommended for ADHD as well. They can start at age of 5. Earlier is too early because of like all this brain development that's happening in that time frame. But I can tell you that after taking him to his 20 sessions at our local clinic, all the problematic, quote unquote, symptoms of ADHD gone. But he's still the creative and loving and sensitive boy that he was before. So I think that, there's a lot that you can do as a parent and as an individual. There's so much information and knowledge that is available at your fingertips right now about how brains develop, what kind of diet is good for brains, what kind of exercise regimen is good for brains. And I highly encourage everyone here listening to do exactly that. And if they are interested, they could look into more of what's in my book, which is refactoring your own brain, reprogramming what it is that is not working. I made sure to write the book in a way that's accessible for folks who are in tech, but also for those who are interested in getting in tech. So if any future CS degree or bootcamp student is listening to us today, it might be an interesting read for them. So that way they can avoid imposter syndrome, burning themselves out, troubles speaking to other people, or self-marketing struggles before they even start their very first job.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful segue because we talked about, going into career and then going all the way into how the brain can be formed. And there's just so many tools out there available for individuals to change their circumstance, change their lives, to change the way they're thinking. And I know sometimes they struggle trying to find the tools that work for them. Think of like self audio books and stuff. Like people will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars maybe on these books. I know there's one lady who spent like $50,000 and she has not made much improvement in her life because like she can listen to audiobooks all day, but we need to take some action, and we need to figure out the tools that work for us. So I always tell people, like the books that you read are going to be the accumulation for change that you're trying to make in your life. It might not be like immediate, like you read a book and your life changes, but it gives you the tools and the resources for you to make those adjustments. And our conversation today was definitely that realignment for many people because when we're trying to make a change, it's not easy. There's going to be some faults in the system with how we do things, and we're going to find that there's going to be hiccups. Think of if you are trying to open a business or you're trying to do something with a program. You typically don't just launch. You kind of do a soft opening or you do like a alpha and a beta, and then you figure out the bugs. And when all the bugs are good and clean and cleared, then you're like, okay, good. But then there's some times when you say, all right, I'm ready, I'm going to jump. And you have to just go, head first into it. Depends on your situation. But I always say the best thing for an individual to do is to get a coach, to get a guide, to get a mentor, to have someone on your team to help you along the way because it's going to make the journey so much smoother and so much more palatable for you and manageable. We don't want to necessarily do things that always turn us off. We want to do things that invigorate us to take more action in our day. So I loved our conversation today, Dagna. Want you to give us some final words and then for you to tell the audience where they can find you.
Yes, would love that. And I took so many notes as you were speaking, Michael, because I agree that, books are phenomenal, but hey, books will never give you feedback that's personalized and customized to what you need to actually hear, right? And sometimes it's the tough love telling you that you're heading in the wrong direction or that you're distracting yourself. Because today, with all this amount of information available at our fingertips, free a lot of the time equals distraction. So it's really about deciding of what it is that you want and going after that. And I would say jump before you're ready. Just make sure you have that support in place to catch you when you fall and to help you keep going. So that's all I wanted to add because I feel like what you said a moment ago was just phenomenal. And in terms of change and growth, a lot of the time people want to change and join these free groups, free communities, and read free books. But the reality is, if you want to change, you gotta be invested. Otherwise, you're probably not gonna do much.
And how can people find you?
So the best place to find me is my website, themindfuldev.com, as well as LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter under my real actual name, Dagna Bieda, so you can find me there. I'd love to connect.
Perfect. And I'll make it easy for everyone. You don't have to worry about any spelling. It's going to be in the description box below. You can easily just check her out on her website, on her socials, follow her, and learn more about what she's doing and continue to support her work. Because as a coach myself, we understand that we're not in this fight by ourselves, right? I understand we need people to grow and to prosper. We have blind spots and we have to be able to see our blind spots, but we have a hard time doing that by ourselves. So having someone that has your back is so important. And Dagna, I know you're going to have so many people's backs. I know you're helping all of your clients out right now with their mind and their career and just overall well-being in life. I do want to thank you for coming on, talking about your work, and just being that person that wants to make that ripple effect and change the world.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciated our time here together.